Hello all, we'll be revising the whole environment. So we'll be dividing it into two parts. In the first part, we'll be talking about the basics of environment, and the next topic is biodiversity, then environmental pollution, then environmental issues, then climate change. Initially, let's talk about environment. So let's define what is environment. Environment is simply the surrounding what we see. So it consists of majorly the biotic components and abiotic components. Biotic components means the living things like plants, animals, everything, saprophytes, everything. So abiotic like sunlight, temperature, humidity, pressure, anything which is abiotic in nature, which is non-living in nature. So these are the living things, these are non-living things. So everything that is present around us is which around us is known as environment. Next, let's understand what is ecology. So here the word logy, everyone knows it is means study. So what here we study is the relationship. So here we study the relationship of environment and biotic components and abiotic components. The study of the here we'll be studying the relationship between biotic and abiotic components. So we'll be studying the relationship between biotic and abiotic with environment. So these are the relationships which we study is known as ecology. Next, we will understand the holism in ecology. So before it, we will understand the relationship between the environment and ecology. So we can derive simply in this way. Environment is subset of ecological system. So yeah, now coming to holism in ecology. So simply remember it in this way. Holism in ecology can be simply understood. The layers in the ecology can be simply understood by this uh, simple synonym. So I for BD. So here I means individual, P means population. This is individual, this is population, C means community, E means ecosystem, B is biome. Here this B is biosphere. Here this is bio. Individual means any simple species. Let's say simple plant, a simple animal. So these are all the examples of individuals. So what does population means? Population is nothing but summation of many individuals, like group of plants, group of plants. If there's a group of animals here, let's say a group of tigers. So this is called the population. Next, community. So community, we can say it is a group of multiple populations. We can say summation of multiple populations. So here community. So here we can talk. Let's say example grassland community. So it may consist of herbs, shrubs, trees. So trees is one kind of population, shrubs is one kind of population, herbs is one kind of population. So summation of different kinds of populations is leading to some community. Here it's a grassland community. Next ecosystem. So ecosystem. So we can understand it simply by let's say terrestrial ecosystem. What does terrestrial ecosystem means? So it may consist of different communities. So it is also summation of different communities. So we can have grassland community, we have desert community, we have forest community. So we have different communities. So the summation of these communities is called an ecosystem. Next, what is biome? So biome is simply a large regional unit with major vegetation types. So we have different biomes. So based upon different latitudes, we categorize them. So let's say here we see warm desert, so tropical grassland, savannas, so tundra, boreal forest. So these are so this is the triangle. So it is from 0 degree latitude to 90 degree north or south latitudes. So this is called as biome. Next, what is biosphere? So biosphere is the ultimate. So biosphere basically is of this type, biosphere. So the biosphere basically consists of atmosphere, hydrosphere. So here atmosphere means air, hydrosphere is simply the water, Lithosphere is simply the earth, land. So land, water and air. So combining all these things is called as a biosphere. So yeah, this is basically the fundamentals of environment. Now let's see in detail about the ecosystem. So what does it mean ecosystem? So earlier we saw this thing IPOC VB. So ecosystem, biosphere. So ecosystem is smaller unit, biosphere is a larger unit. So simply talking, so ecosystem is a structural and the functional unit of a biosphere. So if ecosystem is this subsystem, is a subunit, then the biosphere is a superset. So where biosphere consists of all, so air, water, land. So let's see about ecosystem in detail. So what does it mean? So let's say there is summation of all the biological community. So as like we saw earlier, what is ecosystem? Ecosystem is nothing but a summation of many communities. So and the interaction with the physical environment, this leads to a lot of exchange of energy and recycling of nutrients. So this completely comprises of ecosystem. Now let's understand the flow chart of classification of ecosystem. So ecosystem is majorly classified into natural ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. In natural ecosystem, we can further classify them as terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. So terrestrial ecosystem, as like we discussed earlier, it mainly consists of grassland, forest, desert. So grassland is basically we can say a medium between the forest ecosystem and the desert ecosystem. So these two are extremes. Forest and desert are extreme, and grassland ecosystem is in middle. Next, coming to aquatic ecosystem, there will be a freshwater ecosystem and there will be a marine water ecosystem. So freshwater ecosystem mainly consists of a lentic, lotic, and wetlands. So wetlands, there will be a particular list which will be classified as wetland based upon the specific criteria, which we'll be discussing later. And coming to what is lentic, lotic. So lentic is basically a still water. So lotic is basically a flowing water. So what does still water mean? So still water means like ponds, lakes, all those things. Where flowing water means like rivers. Next, coming to marine ecosystem. So marine ecosystem majorly consists of oceans and coastal areas. So this is the broad classification of ecosystem. Next, coming to the components of ecosystem. So ecosystem majorly consists of abiotic components and biotic components. As I told earlier, biotic is the term which is referred to that of a living things. Abiotic is for non-living things. So non-living things can be further classified into climate, edaphic. So whenever the word edaphic is used, it is basically means soil. So this is the most important keyword. So next, the climatic factors simply like rain, light, wind, temperature, and edaphic factors like soil, pH, minerals, topography. These are all something related to soil. Next, coming to biotic components, it majorly consists of a producers, consumers, decomposers. So again, consumers can be classified as primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, quaternary consumers. So this is the broad classification of components of ecosystem. Need not mug up this, just understand what are biotic components, what are abiotic components, what are the different type of biotic and abiotic components. That's it. Next, coming to ecotone. So what does ecotone mean? So ecotone is simply a zone of transition between multiple diverse ecosystem. Let's say this is ecosystem 1 and this is ecosystem 2. So these two are different ecosystems. So there will be a transition zone which will be lying between these two ecosystems. So this region is called ecotone. So as like we defined here, it is a zone of transition between multiple, which means two or more diverse ecosystem. So example, let's say mangrove. So mangrove basically lies between the land and sea ecosystem, and simply estuaries, which is the ecotone between a freshwater ecosystem and a saline water ecosystem. Next concept is let's understand what is ecological niche. So whenever this word comes, it simply understand this keyword. So means every organism has a separate role, which is unique. So let's say this is organism one, this is organism two. This has individual role, this has individual role too. So everything has an individual role. If let's say both has equal role, let's say both has equal role like R1, R1. So then abruptly due to competition, so one will be eliminated. So here let's understand in detail. So it means simply this is the principle that ecological niche follows. No two species in a community can have a same niche. So this is the thing which I told. Next, understanding the food chain and food web. So what does food chain means? So food chain is simply, so we can say like this. So food chain is a subset of food web, we can say. So food chain is simply a single flow. So let's understand about grazing food chain. So there will be a plant. So plant will be eaten by caterpillar, and caterpillar will be eaten by lizard, and snake eats this lizard. So this is simply a food chain. So if it consists in form of a web, like say, so there will be a there will be a deer, so there will be a tiger, so there will be a human, so human can eat tiger, so human can eat deer, so of course it is not legal. So tiger can eat also human, so which is quite possible. So this kind of web is forming. So if related to food, this kind of web is forming, then it's called the food web. Next, let's understand about the biotic interactions. This is the most important and mostly asked question. So biotic interactions is majorly of six types. So let's understand what is mutualism. So in the word itself says mutualism is both will be benefited. So if there is some organism one or some species one, species A, species B. So if both the species gets benefited, then it is called mutualism. Example, pollination. So during pollination, both the plant will be getting benefited and the insect which will be transferring the pollen grains from one plant to other is also benefited. So both are benefited. Plant is benefited, insect is benefited. Next is competition. So due to competition, so it means so both will be losing. So both species A and species B will be losing. So let's say there is a, for example, a food is there. So let's understand. So a particular food is there. So species one is trying, so eating it, and species two is also eating it. But what species one will be getting food by two, and species two will be getting food by two, as both are sharing. But they both need food to survive. So complete food to survive, but they are getting only food by two, F by two, food by two. So it means they are not fulfilling their needs because of sharing these things. So common thing. So it is competition. Next, predation. So one gets benefited and other gets others will be eliminated. So it is negative for other things. So simply tiger hunting a deer. So tiger is plus, deer is minus. Simply neutralism. So neutralism is, as the word itself suggests, so 0 0. So there will be no positive or there will be no negative. So these are the four things which everyone can understand simply. So major confusion lies here: commensalism and amensalism. So what does commensalism means? So one organism gets benefited and other organism or other species will be neutral. And in amensalism, uh, one loses the thing and other is neutralized. So let's say in commensalism, cow dung beetles example. So in cow dung, so dung beetles will be taking a shelter. So cow dung here is zero, it is affecting nothing. But dung beetles is getting positive because it is getting shelter. Similarly, in amensalism, a tree shades a plant. So tree is zero, so it has neither positive or negative effect. But while it shading a small plant, then it the sunlight is not reaching this plant because the tree shades the small plant, so it is negative. So these are majorly the six biotic interactions. Next important concept is ecological pyramids. So there are basically three ecological pyramids. So what does ecological pyramids means? So why we use this? It is simply a graphical representation of relationships between different organisms. So relationship between so let's say organism one, organism two. So establishing a relationship between these two organisms, if so, there will be definitely a relationship between any two organisms. So if we are establishing this relationship via the in graphical form, so it can be done through pyramids. So pyramids can be in this form, upright or inverted. So let's see different scenarios. So there will be three types of ecological pyramids. First is pyramids of numbers. Second is pyramids of biomass. Third is pyramids of energy. So what is pyramids of numbers? So it simply defines the number of individuals per unit area. So how many individuals are there? How many number of individuals are there? So it can be both upright pyramid and inverted pyramid. So example, let's say grassland ecosystem. So there is a grass, and for example, there are 100 pieces of grass. There will be a let's say 10 insects, and there will be say let's say 10 one frog. So one frog eat 10 insects. 10 insects eat hundreds of grass. So example we are talking about. So this is upright. So here the number is decreasing. So this is meaning of upright. Next, let's talk about inverted. So let's take example of parasitic food chain. So there will be some amount of trees, let's say 10 trees, and there will be let's say 20 birds which feed on this, and there will be around 30 lice which feed on these birds. So this is inverted. Next, coming to pyramids of biomass. So here the word biomass, it means the total amount of organic matter. So calculation of total amount of organic matter at every trophic level is known as a pyramid of biomass. So it can also be both upright and inverted. So upright, let's say example terrestrial ecosystem. So let's say there is a grass, there is deer, there is lion. So grass. So let's say dry weight is let's say 100 kgs. So these numbers indicate basically the total dry weight at each trophic level. So grass is 100 kgs, deer biomass dry weight will be 10 kgs, and the line which feed on this tiger may be weighing around let's say 1 kg. So this is upright. Next, coming to inverted, let's take example of aquatic ecosystem. So there will be small fish, medium fish, big fish. Small fish there may be many number. So you understand with the same example, we can if it is the pyramids of number, uh, the triangle will be in this upright. But here we are talking about biomass. So even though there are many small fishes, so but the amount or the total weight which constitute comprising them all is just 1 gram per meter cube volume. And let's say and the next let's say big fish which feed on the small fish which has more weight, which let's say about 10 grams per meter cube volume. Next, third type is pyramid of energy. So, what does pyramid of energy means? It is the total amount of energy per unit time in a unit area. So, it can only be upright. It cannot be inverted. So, why? There is simple reason because of the law of 10 percentage energy transfer. Because of this law, what does it say? So, whenever we are moving from one trophic level, so this is trophic level 1, this is trophic level 2. So, when we are moving from one trophic level to other trophic level, so there will be always lose of 10 percentage of energy at least. So, when simply let's say when we are moving from producers from herbivores to carnivores, so there will be always 10 percentage loss of. So I mean 90 percentage will be lost. Only 10 percentage will be. So here let's say. So only 90 percentage will be lost. Only 10 percentage will be transferred. So here let's say 100 units. Here 90 percentage loss means only 10 units will be transferred here. Here 90 percentage loss. It means only one unit will be transferred here. So this is pyramid of energy. It can only be upright. So this is the major difference between all three. Next important concept is bioaccumulation. So let's understand the difference between bioaccumulation, bioconcentration, biomagnification. So bioaccumulation means, let's say there will be different trophic levels, right? So this is trophic level 1, this is trophic level 2. So whenever any enters into one trophic level, pollutant enters into one trophic level or into a food chain. So let's say this is a food chain. So food chain, so there, uh, so example take like I say earlier. So deer, so let's say tiger. Okay. So tiger feeds on deer here. So whenever any pollutants enter into one trophic level, then it is called bioaccumulation. Bioconcentration is also same thing, but if it is aquatic, so if the entry from the pollutant is water source, so the pollutant entry is water source, then it is called as a bioconcentration. Both are same. So let's understand. Entry of pollutants into food chain is called bioaccumulation. It occurs within the trophic level. So it occurs at one trophic level. One trophic level. It occurs at one trophic level. Next, biomagnification. So it is an expansion of bioaccumulation. So pollutants move from one trophic level to another. So here we can say from trophic level 1 to trophic level 2, the pollutants will be moving. So this is called biomagnification. So for a pollutant to move from one trophic level to another trophic level, there needs to be satisfaction of four conditions. One is the pollutant should be long lived. Next is it should be stable and mobile so that it will be easy and freely moving. Next, it should be insoluble in fats. And fourth most is biologically active. That pollutant should be biologically active. So this is the major difference between bioaccumulation, bioconcentration, biomagnification. Next, let's understand about ecological succession. So what does succession means here is directional change in the vegetation in an ecology. So succession always defines these things, directional change in the vegetation. So vegetation, let's say simple example. So there is a barren land. So because of some activity, there has been grown a tree. So there is a change in vegetation from zero to something. So this is a directional change in vegetation. So it has majorly the three stages. So pioneer community, serial community, climax community. Pioneer community means it's a first organism which form community. So I told you earlier. So there will when there is a barren, there will be nothing. But because of some activity, there will be a first organism that will be obtained, that will be living, that will be forming a community on this barren thing. So example we can say liches and mosses, simply a small plants thing. Next, cereal community. So from these liches and mosses, there will be a forming of herbs and shrubs. So big trees, plants, kind of those things. Next, climax community. So this is the climax community. So a big tree, a big ecosystem will be formed. So which is more stable than many. I mean than previous two stages. So pioneer community, serial community, and climax community are the three levels of the stages that any ecological succession will be having. So these are the types of ecological succession. So primary succession, secondary succession. This is one type of categorization. The second type of categorization is autogenic and allogenic. So autogenic here allogenic means suction is brought by outside forces, means foreign forces. So if the suction is brought by self, then it is called autogenic. Primary succession means, so let's say, so this is the example. So when there is nothing, so this is the example. When there is nothing on the land, so there is leads to formation of something. Now the secondary succession is an extension of primary succession. So let's say there is a tree already. So there is fire happened. So there will be, so again there will be zero because the fire happened, nothing exists. And again the primary succession, let's say, happen here. And again the community, so the climax community has formed here. So this whole thing is called secondary succession. Means succession is happening not just on a barren thing, but a regenerative kind of thing. And the third classification is based on autotrophic succession and heterotrophic succession. Next, let's understand about the aquatic ecosystem. So basically the aquatic ecosystem, let's say, primarily we can classify them based upon the salt concentration. So we can call them as freshwater aquatic ecosystem, brackish water ecosystem, marine water ecosystem. So fresh water. So when it can be called as a fresh water is basically when the water is tested, if it shows less than 5 ppt, then it can be called as fresh water. Similarly, if it shows between 5 to 35 ppt units, then it is called brackish. If it tested more than 35 ppt, then it is marine. So simple examples are ocean is a marine, estuary, mangrove, these are all kind of things are brackish. Fresh water is like lakes, ponds, rivers, this which shows less than 5 ppt. So here let's understand in detail what is this ppt. So PPT means parts per thousand. So how it's is defined is number of grams per liter. So here we're saying 5 PPT. So it means 5, there will be 5 grams of salt. There will be 5 grams of salt in 1 liter water. Means here the salt is less. If it is 35 ppt, then we will be having 35 grams of salt in 1 liter of water. Whenever we take a sample 1 liter of water, 35 grams of salt will be present, which is huge. It means that the salt concentration is more. So majorly the aquatic organisms there will be 5. So which are neutron, nekton, benthos, plankton, periphyton. So let's understand them through this figure. So this is the land biomass, and this is all the aquatic thing. So neutron, they basically swim on the surface. So here they will be present here. Neutron, Neutson, neutron. So they'll be present here. Nekton. So nekton is also similar to neutron, but they can swim on the surface and inside the surface. Nekton. Nekton. And what is bentho? So these are the organisms that are attached to the bottom. So here there will be benthos. So we can say example is seagrass. And nekton example is simply fish. And next is what is plankton and what is periphyton. So plankton, this basically flow on the surface water. So this basically flow on the surface water, plankton. And periphyton. So let's say there is some tree here, and on this tree a periphyton will be present. So these are attached to the plants. So example like algae. So these are majorly the 5 aquatic organisms. Like neutron is one aquatic organism. Next is nekton. Next is benthos, periphyton, plankton. So these 5 are the types of aquatic organisms that is present in an aquatic ecosystem. Now let's talk about the factors limiting the productivity of aquatic life. So the first major thing is sunlight. So when we consider any aquatic body, so let's say this is whole aquatic body, and there will be a sunlight coming from out external source. So there will be some region, let's say this is the separating region, so where sunlight will be received properly, and there will be an underground region which is beneath the aquatic uh, system. So where there will be no sunlight. So this is called as an aphotic zone, and this is called as a photic zone. This is called as a photic zone. This is called as an aphotic zone. So in photic zone, there will be both photosynthesis and respiration takes place. In aphotic zone, obviously respiration takes place because there will be some or other kind of living organism that is present, but there will be no photosynthesis happening in aphotic zone. Next major factor is dissolved oxygen. So what does dissolved oxygen means? It is simply the amount of O2 present in the water. So if there is more amount of O2 that is available or present in the water body, then it has more dissolved oxygen. So simply let's say fresh water has in general 10 ppm. So here dissolved oxygen is measured in ppm, parts per million, which means here if we are saying 10 ppm, it means 10 mg of O2 gas is present in 1 liter of water taken. Okay, now let's understand how the dissolved oxygen will be differing in
cold water and warm water. So basically cold water has more dissolved oxygen. Simple reason is it is difficult for the oxygen to escape from cold water. Hence cold water contains more amount of oxygen accumulated. Thus the reason cold water has more dissolved oxygen than the warm water. Simply also similarly the running water will have more dissolved oxygen than still water. Next, coming to transparency. So whenever any suspended molecules, so any suspended particulate matters like clay, silt are present on the surface of water body, then basically it blocks the sunlight to enter to the below of uh, water body. So it basically decreases the transparency. And the next factor is temperature. So any temperature fluctuations, any difference in temperatures is basically fatal to aquatic organisms that are present because the adaptability is difficult for them. So these are majorly the four factors which limit the productivity of aquatic life. So these all are threat. So having no sunlight and less dissolved oxygen present and having no transparency and having more changes in the temperature are threat to the aquatic life. Next important concept we will be looking is about eutrophication. So what does eutrophication means? Simply let's say this is the water body and any substances or any compounds like phosphates or which can be through detergents or through pollution. So any substances which added into this water body ecosystem. This is simply called as eutrophication. So it means enrichment of lake. So by adding of additional nutrients, so this makes the lake enrichment of various phosphates molecules in that water body. So what happens if the eutrophication happens? It means there will be an anaerobic condition. So it means there will be a lack of oxygen. So lack of oxygen condition. So O2 will be decreased. So which means organisms present in the aquatic organisms which is present in the water body will be dying. In the aquatic ecosystem will be dying. So if it happens, there will be more decomposition. So whichever the organisms has died, they will be undergoing a decomposition. So the decomposition rate will be more, which is simply called as an algae bloom. Means to decompose them, a large amount of algae bloom will be happening. So it again further decreases the availability of oxygen. This basically increases biological oxygen demand. Means in a normal situation, dissolved oxygen is there. So with Okay, let's continue. So there is a dissolved oxygen which is present in a water body. So with more decomposition, so there will be a lot of oxygen which is demanded by these organisms or the algae which is responsible for decomposition. So it means there is an increase of oxygen demand. So oxygen demand is increasing. So this is simply called the biological oxygen demand. Also there is something other concept like chemical oxygen demand. Let's also see the difference between biological oxygen demand BOD and chemical oxygen demand COD in a little future. So yeah, and also the other relationship is whenever there is a temperature increase, then the dissolved oxygen will be decreasing, and this also leads to increase in the biological oxygen demand. So this is the flow which is important with respect to eutrophication. Coming to what are the effects of it? So the major effects of this is four. So aquatic ecosystem degradation will be happening because of eutrophication, and also there will be a decrease in the biodiversity, and there will be a new emergence of invasive species, and it also eutrophication also leads to toxicity, means which is also leading to the loss of corals. So we are in the little later we'll be also understanding what is corals. Next, coming to what are the difference between biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand. So, simply defining biological oxygen demand is basically uh, the measurement of the consumed oxygen by the aquatic microorganisms. So, how much the oxygen which is needed for a microorganism to decompose or oxidize an organic matter. is simply called as a biological oxygen demand. And if the requirement of dissolved oxygen for the oxidation of organic or inorganic constitutes both, then it is called as a chemical. Means simply we can say it like this. So it is only for the organic matter decomposition. So oxygen consumed by microorganism. Oxygen consumed by microorganism for organic matter decomposition. So if it is for organic matter plus inorganic matter decomposition for both organic matter and inorganic, then it is called as a chemical oxygen demand. So it basically is the organic matter is breakdown in here in form of aerobic conditions by aerobic microorganisms, whereas here it is done by the chemical reagents. So it break down only the organic matter, it break down both organic as well as inorganic. Another parameter which is differentiates BOD and COD is basically the time. It takes approximately few days for the process, and COD it approximately takes only few hours to complete. It takes only few hours to complete. So we can say that BOD basically is lower than COD value, but COD value we can say is more than BOD value. So this is majorly about the eutrophication and difference between biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand. Now let's talk about the coral reefs. So before understanding coral reefs, let's understand what are corals. So corals is basically an invertebrate animals. It means it don't have any backbone. Similar like worms. So each coral animal is called polyp. Polyp. So these polyps or polyp means coral. So these coral won't exist individually, but they exist as a group. So in this manner they exist. So the process of formation of this kind as a group is called as budding. Budding. So yeah, here we can see. So corals lives in groups. So which is called as a colony. So the formation of this colony is called as a budding. And they have also a small microscopic algae, which is a blue-green algae present on them, which is known as a zooxanthellae. So which is responsible for the polyp or the coral to be so colorful. So it is in this way. So this is the, let's say, polyp, and on this there will be a presence of this blue-green algae. So this blue-green algae will be present here. So this gives a colorfulness to the coral. Next, so between this zooxanthellae and coral, there will be a mutualistic relationship. So let's understand this relationship. So this is coral and this is a blue-green algae which is zooxanthellae. So what does it mean by mutualistic? So both will be benefited. So plus plus. So what does coral? So coral basically provide components to the blue-green algae, which the blue-green algae is able to perform the photosynthesis. Similarly, so after performing the photosynthesis by this blue-green algae, which is zooxanthellae, this provide the results of this photosynthesis to this polyp so that it can carbonate their calcium. So here both are getting benefited, which is mutualistic relationship. Next, coming to coral reefs. So up to now what we saw is basically the corals. So coral reef is simply a millions of tiny polyps. So if there are large amounts of group of polyps present, then it is simply called as a coral reef. So it can occur both shallow water and deep water. So in deep water means we can say there will be also a cold coral reef that will be present. But here, so okay, before, so this is an important point which we'll also discuss a little later. So let's see what are the conditions that are required for the formation of coral reefs. So coral reefs can be found where and when it's needed. So there should be some conditions which should be satisfied. So it basically needs 25 to 30 degrees temperature. and also 27 to 40 ppm parts per million salinity, and a shallow water is needed which is less than 60 to 65-meter depth. So here understand, it is not uh, deep water, only shallow water. Here I told both corals can be both shallow water and deep water. So we'll understand what's the dichotomy or irony statement these two are. Next condition is sediment free, and it should be a clean water. So if there are more number of sediments, then the coral will die. So there should be a sediment free situation and the water should be little bit clean. Next, so it would be beneficial for the coral reefs formation if there are little currents or the waves presence, so that there will be a distribution of oxygen easily available to them. Means easy photosynthesis can be taken place and the corals can flourish. See, okay, now let's see this. So shallow water and deep water. So shallow water. So here understand, in deep water zooxanthellae algae will not be present. There will be other algae which is not zooxanthellae. Whereas in shallow water zooxanthellae can take place. So these are the conditions which we are talking about is zooxanthellae plus polyp situation. Here polyp will be present but not zooxanthellae. There will be some other algae which is present in deep water. So deep water means simply the cold coral reef. So in exam there might be a question. So there will be only shallow water under which a coral reef can be found. So it is false because in deep water also it can be found. But if the question is in this way, zooxanthellae can occur only uh, in a shallow water, then it is true. The next question is, let's say cold coral reefs is possible means yes, it is definitely possible. They will be present. Next, let's understand the different types of reefs, coral reefs. So first is fringing reef, next is barrier reef, next is atoll. So what does fringing reef means? It simply grows out from the land and connected to it. So it is in this way. So let's understand here with this example. So this is the active volcano. Let me change the color. Okay, this is the active volcano, and fringing reef means a reef is formed outside this volcanic activity. So, so it also says the same thing. So grows out from the land and connected to it. So example is South Florida reef. So in India also every reef that is present is a fringing coral reef, except in Lakshadweep. So in Lakshadweep it is the atoll that is present. Next category is next type of reef is barrier reef. So it is basically separated from the land by the lagoon. So it is basically around the shoreline. See, there is a lagoon which is differentiating this barrier reef from the land. So example, the popular example is Great Barrier Reef. Next third type is atoll. So atoll is basically whenever there is a sink in this volcano, then there will be only present of this uh, reef around. So with no landmass connected to it. So it is found away from the coast. So it is around the about the mouth of the volcano. So example is Fiji atoll and also the Lakshadweep atolls. So Indonesia has the largest coral reef area. This is one important fact, and the next important fact is largest aggregation of coral reef is present in the Great Barrier Reef, which is a popular tourism present in Australia, Queensland. Next important concept is coral bleaching. So what does coral bleaching means? So coral bleaching does not mean dyeing of corals. It means simply the corals leaving their color. So discoloration of corals is called coral bleaching, but not dyeing of corals is called coral bleaching. So this is the important thing which we need to understand. Next, so yeah, so let us understand this important thing. So let's understand this flow. So we know that there will be a healthy coral. There will be a healthy coral that will be present. So if there is any this kind of situation, if there is any this kind of situation happen, like there is a change in temperature which may be happening due to El Nino reason or heat waves or any other reason, and the next is, let's say, pollution. Because of extreme low tides there will be accumulation of pollution added to the water body, or the third reason, let it be degradation of water quality due to any reason like water pollution or any kind. And the fourth reason is, let's say, eutrophication, means other algae on the surface block the sunlight. And the fifth reason, let's say, ocean acidification. So if these any of these reasons is attached to the healthy coral, if this any situation is happening with the healthy coral, then what will happen? Zooxanthellae leaves the coral because it can't survive in these conditions. With these conditions, it can't survive. So it is called as stressed coral. Then it will be called stressed coral. So if it happens for a long time, what will be happening? There will be no food and color. So to the coral because slowly zooxanthellae will be leaving. So there will be no food and color that will be giving as an input to the coral or polyp. Then what we say that coral is called the bleached coral. So this is simply called the coral bleaching. So because of the pollution, there will be increase in nutrients in the water and which also increase phytoplankton which blocks the sunlight. And understanding the coral reef distribution in India. So coral reefs don't exist in west coast. I mean east coast. East coast. So in east coast of India, there will be no corals present. So it is present in Gulf of Kutch region, Lakshadweep region, and Gulf of Annar region and Andaman Nicobar region. So only in these coastal places there will be a distribution in India. And let's see also this thing. So what are the measures for the coral reef protection? So the measures which we took is basically the Biotic technology. So Zoological Survey of India will be growing a solid limestone rock structure in the sea. So this is basically the biorock technology for sake of coral reef protection. Next important initiative is Global Coral Reef Research and Accelerator Platform, which is a part of G20 initiative. And third thing is National Coastal Mission. And the fourth thing is Palan is the first country to ban the reef toxic sunscreens. And also some other conservation measures for the coral reef at the global is International Convention for International Coral Reef Initiative, which is announced at the first conference of parties at Convention of Biodiversity 1994. So it was founded in 1994. So it basically an informal partnership, not anymore any formal partnership. It is simply an informal partnership between the nations. So India is also a member of it. Next important global conservation measure is through the institution of Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, which was established worldwide for sake of monitoring of degradation of coral reef. And at India level, so the different acts that are responsible for the conservation of coral reef, Wildlife Protection Act, Environmental Protection of Coastal Regulation Zone, and Coral Reef Bleaching Act, which was started since 2011, and Eastern Coral Reef Research Center at Port Blair, Andaman Nicobar. So this is present for conducting various research activities on the coral reefs and their bleaching and their depletion. Next important concept let's understand is mangroves. So what are mangroves? So mangroves is simply an assemblage of the salt tolerant trees and shrubs. So any trees or shrub which is salt tolerant. So accumulation of them is called a mangrove at one place. So they basically grow in intertidal regions where fresh water and the salt water meet. So it happens between 25 degrees north to 25 degrees north to 25 degrees south region only. So whenever there is a fresh water, whenever there is salt water, so there will be an intertidal zone where the mangroves will be forming. So basically, mangroves absorb the fresh water from the saline or brackish water. So simply they are ecotone we can say. So they are basically ecotone between terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. And basically these mangroves are salt tolerant trees. Hence it means halophytes. Halo is the word which we use always for anything related to the salt or salinity. Next, these mangroves act as a breeding ground for the fish and it also moderates the coastal floods and soil erosion. These are the major advantages of mangroves. And they also have a special roots like prop roots, nematophores, which are also called the blind roots and still roots. So basically these help impede, means block the water flow and stabilize the coastal shores. So there is a kind of a stable coastal ecosystem ecosystem that can be maintained with the help of these mangroves. And mangroves can exist both in tropical and subtropical regions because, as like I told, 25 degrees north to 25 degrees south, there will be presence of these mangroves. And coming to India, it is having a total area of 4,992 kilometers square, and which has increased than compared to previous years. So which is almost 3% of the world uh, mangrove area. Next, highest amount of mangroves are present in West Bengal. Next, followed by Gujarat. Next, Andaman Nicobar, and other is Andhra Pradesh. Next, highest increase in mangrove is seen in Odisha, and highest decrease in mangrove is seen in Gujarat. So these are some of the facts which needs to be remembered. So let's see some of the places where mangroves are present in India. So in Gujarat, in Sundarban region, West Bengal, in Sundarban region, West Bengal, in Mahanadi in Odisha. So Krishna Godavari mangroves at AP. So at Goa, there will be places where the mangroves are present, and this is at the Kaveri Delta in Tamil Nadu. Next is Andaman Nicobar Islands. So mangroves are present both in west coast as well as east coast. But understand, the coral reefs are present only in the west coast, not in the east coast. But of course, in Andaman Nicobar they are present. Next, let's understand about the wetland ecosystem. So, what does wetland can be defined as? It is simply a land area which is saturated with water. So, that water presence can be either permanently or seasonally. And so, it is basically intermediate stage between the deep water body and terrestrial habitat. So, wetland is basically it is a ecotone kind of ecotone between the deep water body as well as the terrestrial habitat in land. So wetland classification can be done in this way: inland wetland and coastal wetland. So inland wetland examples are lakes, ponds, oxbow lakes, rivers, waterlogged areas, seasonal wetlands, swamps, marshes, all those things. Whereas coastal means estuaries, lagoons, creeks, backwaters, bays. These are all the coastal wetlands. Next, coming to important thing in uh, wetlands is Ramsar Convention. So Ramsar Convention, which was signed in 1971, Ramsar is a city in Iran. So where this convention was signed in 1971. So but India joined it in 1973. So the major philosophy of Ramsar Convention is wise use of wetlands. So what does this Ramsar? What does is wetland comprises of anything like mangroves, peats, marshes, rivers, lake deltas. But understand the rice fields does not come under this wetland because it was removed. Earlier it was a part of wetland, but now the rice fields are not anymore a part of the wetlands. So there will be Wetland International, which is an NGO, which is also the international, which is also used for the conservation or any suggestion activities related to the wetlands. Next, on 2nd February, the World Wetland Day is celebrated. And coming to the wetland area in India, the more amount of wetland areas present in Gujarat, next followed by West Bengal. So understand, whereas in mangroves, more area in India is present in West Bengal, next followed by the Gujarat. Here it is reverse. Next, currently India has almost 75 Ramsar sites that are declared. Next, there is 75 Ramsar wetlands. We have also a concept called Montreux record, which is a part of Ramsar sites, wetlands. So in India there are two wetlands that are present in Montreux record. One is Keoladeo National Park and other is Loktak Lake in Manipur. Keoladeo National Park is present in Rajasthan. So why these two are present in Montreux record is basically these are degrading at a faster rate. So these wetlands are degrading at a faster rate than any other. So these are more important for conservation. So hence these are present in Montreux record. So simply understand, you can say like this: Montreux record is a subset of Ramsar sites, Ramsar wetland sites. Next, other important act or rule or regulation that is present in India with respect to wetland is Wetland Conservation and Management Rule 2017. It basically provides more power to the states for protection and conservation of wetlands. So decentralization happens.
and it also prohibits solid waste dumping, and it also prohibits converting a wetland into non-wetland use, and it also prohibits setting up any new industry or expanding the existing industries.
Now let's understand about biodiversity. So it simply is defined as variety and variability among the living organisms. So how so let's say there is organism 1, there is organism 2, and so on organism n. So how different they are. So this is known as biodiversity. So it is essential in an environment uh, to have different uh, what we say different varieties of organism and different variabilities that is present in these organisms. Next, there will be different levels of biodiversity. We can say there is a genetic biodiversity, there is species biodiversity, and ecosystem. So, what does it mean of genetic biodiversity? So, let's say we are humans. So every human has come from the Homo sapiens, but the genes of different the genes of different humans is different. So human 1 may have gene 1 and human 2 may have gene 2 and human 3 may have gene 3. So there will be different genes in different humans even though everyone come from Homo sapiens. This is called genetic biodiversity. Next is species biodiversity. So it means there will be a variation species. So species 1, species 2, like tiger is one species, deer is one species. So this is known as species biodiversity. And next is ecosystem biodiversity. So simply example we can say as like we talked earlier, so terrestrial ecosystem is one kind of biodiversity and aquatic ecosystem. This is one kind of biodiversity. So different ecosystems. So terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. So this is known as ecosystem biodiversity. Next, coming to measurement of biodiversity. So biodiversity can be measured actually in two forms. So let's talk about the first form. So one is species richness and species evenness. So what does it mean by species richness? It means number of different species. Let's say species 1, species 2, and so on species n. So if there are so here there are multiple. If n is more, then it means number of species are more. Means number of different species are there. So it means it is species richness is high. Then what is species evenness? It is simply the relative abundance of species richness. So let's say species 1 is there, species 2 is there, and so on species, let's say 100 species are there. But this species is only, so S1 is the species that is only, that is 100 in number, let's say. And species 2, species 3, and so on, up to species 100, there are only few, like like only one species or two species. So only few number. So here S1 is the species which is more in number and other species are less in number. But here observe species richness is there, but species evenness is not there. So for a sustainable ecosystem, it is important that both species richness and species evenness should be there. Next, let's understand about alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity. So, if there is a diversity of organisms within a community, then it is called as alpha diversity. And let's say if diversity of organisms, so we are comparing between the communities, then it is known as beta diversity. Gamma diversity is the whole unit, means over total geographical area. So it is known as a gamma diversity. So we can simply classify as this. So alpha biodiversity is subset of beta diversity is subset of gamma biodiversity, the gamma diversity. Next, biodiversity conservation. So there will be two types: in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. In situ conservation means nothing but protected area network. So it may be of different types like sacred groves, sacred lakes. So this is an example of sacred lakes which is present in Sikkim. So here uh, this lake is being protected by Hindus and Buddhists in Sikkim. So it is basically the purpose is to save the aquatic life uh, from degradation. Next, biosphere reserves will be there. Next, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries. So, biosphere reserves will be of two types. There will be terrestrial biosphere and marine biosphere reserve.
Marine Biosphere Reserve. So Marine Biosphere Reserve, simple example is Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve. Similarly, there is also an Exi2, biodiversity conservation, like sacred plants, home gardens, zoos, seed banks, uh, cryopreservation, botanical gardens, etc. etc. So let's especially here talk about the seed bank. So seed bank, the first seed bank that is in the world that is created was Svalbard Global Seed Bank, which is present in Norway. And in India also there is one seed bank in Himalayas, which is second largest seed bank. So now let's discuss in situ biodiversity conservation in detail. So in situ conservation or different protected areas we'll be talking about now. So now let's understand the difference between wildlife sanctuaries, national parks and biosphere reserves. So in national parks, so the grazing, cultivation and private ownership of land is not allowed, whereas there is no such restriction in case of wildlife sanctuary. So in wildlife sanctuary, also understand that conservation is for animals only. Mm, yeah. So next is biosphere reserve. So biosphere reserve was a concept that is brought by the MAB, Man and Animal Biosphere Program of UNESCO. So this concept was formulated in 1971 by UNESCO. So this national parks come under the IUCN category, International for Conservation of Nature category 2, and it comes at wildlife sanctuary under 4 and biosphere reserve under 5. So these national parks basically conservation. So it is basically institute conservation, right? So it is basically habitat specific, whereas wildlife sanctuary is species specific. In biosphere reserve, basically the total biosphere reserve area is divided into three zones. One is core zone, buffer zone, transition zone. So whereas in core zone there will be no activity allowed. So full of restrictions will be there. Whereas in buffer zone there will be a culmination of some restrictions followed by some so freedom to do some activities like tourism, that kind. So whereas in transition zone, so there will be less restrictions when compared to core and buffer. So whereas in national parks, the boundaries are fixed by the state legislative, whereas in wildlife sanctuary, there is no any such restriction or there is no any such type of condition. Both central or state, anyone can do it. Whereas in biosphere reserve, even the state legislative can fix the boundaries. So there are almost more than 104 national parks present, which constitutes around 1.23% of total geographical area in India. Whereas in wildlife sanctuaries, there are more than 550 plus wildlife sanctuaries are present in India, and biosphere reserves. So there are 18 biosphere reserves in India that is declared by the government. Where out of 18, 11 are UNESCO, come under UNESCO Man and Animal Biosphere. So MAB biosphere reserves. Next, in wildlife sanctuary, they can be wildlife sanctuary can be upgraded as national park, but rivers can be happen. But rivers can't be happened. So, so here, out of 11, the first biosphere reserve that India declared is Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve in 1986, and 18th biosphere that was added was Panna Biosphere Reserve, which is present in Madhya Pradesh. It was added in 2022. Next in situ conservation is conservation reserves and community reserves. So what does a conservation reserve mean? So it is simply a buffer zone between two national parks, let's say. So it can so it's not just about national park. So in between two wildlife sanctuaries also it can act as a buffer zone. Between two protected forest areas also it can act as a buffer zone. So any buffer zone between two in situ conservation areas is known as a conservation reserve. Community reserve is also similar kind, but it is basically a private owned one. Next in situ, next protected area is reserve forest and protected forest. So reserve forest, there will be zero public entry. There will be the public will not be allowed at any cost. Whereas in protected forest, local people are allowed. So reserve forest comprises of 53% of the total forest that we declared, and 30% is the protected area of the total forest we declared. So just understand, reserve forest area is more than protected forest area. So these are all the in situ conservations which we studied. So reserve forest, protected forest, conservation reserve, community reserve, national park, wildlife sanctuary, bird reserve. So these are the different in situ conservation. Next is biodiversity hotspots. So yeah, so earlier we talked about in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. So now let's come into biodiversity hotspot. So what do you mean by biodiversity hotspot? So this was the concept that was emerged, introduced by the Norman Myers. So what does it mean? So it's a biogeographical region of biodiversity which is under threat from the humans. So these are the biodiversity regions where the depletion of the biodiversity is so rapid because of human activities. So these are considered as biodiversity hotspots. Means these are very crucial for conservation. Next, what is the criteria to be declared as biodiversity hotspot? An area as a biodiversity hotspot. So one is 0.5% or 1500 endemic species should be present in that area, and of it, at least 70% of the primary vegetation has been lost. So starting so from the start, so at least 70% of the total primary vegetation is lost. That means only 30% has been preserved. So if this criteria is satisfied, then it can be declared as biodiversity hotspot. So in world there are 35 biodiversity hotspots. In India there are 4. So one is Western Ghats, in Andaman Nicobar, Northeast, and Indo-Burma belt or Himalayan belt. So for so government also took some initiatives by appointing 2 committees on Western Ghats for conservation of these biodiversity hotspots. So the 2 committee names are Gadgil Committee and Kasturi Ranjan Committee. So the Gadgil report given by the committee says that the entire Western Ghats should be declared as eco-sensitive area, and there should be no industrial activities permitted in any case. Whereas Kasturi Ranjan report says that 37% of that Western Ghat area should be declared as eco-sensitive area. So with it also permitted some limited industrial activities, economical activities. Next, coming to hotspots. So hotspots is also similar to hotspot, but it is for oceans. So it is given by the Mission Blue, which is an NGO. It is not anything related to the UN. So India has 2 hotspots. One is Andaman Nicobar and other is Lakshadweep. Next, MegaDiverse countries. So it was given by Conservation International. So it declared 17 countries as MegaDiverse countries. So once check in Google, what are the 17 countries, MegaDiverse countries that was declared by the Conservation International. Again, it is an NGO, not anything related to the United Nations. And the criteria to be declared as a country as MegaDiverse countries. So it should contains at least more than 500 species of endemic plants and animals be present in that nation. Next thing is IUCN RedDataBook. So IUCN International Union for Conservation of Nature. It is basically an NGO and it is nothing related to United Nations. It was founded in 1964 and basically it has a red data book. So it contains both pink pages and green pages. So what does pink pages means is basically the critically endangered species are present there. Whereas in green pages, earlier which are endangered has now no more longer are endangered are present in green pages. Those species are present in green pages. So this red data book contains the red data list. So basically threatened species. So what is the criteria to be declared in this red data list? So basically it will be classified as critically endangered, and vulnerable. So these are the 3 categories that will be present in this red data list. So what is the let's check out what is the criteria for it. So to be declared as a critically endangered, if the population size is less than 50, then and the population lost in the last 10 years is 90 percentage. So if these 2 conditions are satisfied, then it can be declared as critically endangered species. And next is endangered species. If the population size is less than 250 and the population lost in the last 10 years is more than 70 percentage, then it can be categorized as endangered. And coming to vulnerable. So if the population size is less than 10,000 species and the population lost in the last 10 years is more than 50 percentage, then it can be classified under the vulnerable. vulnerable species category. Next, let's understand about different biodiversity conventions. So, for the protection of biodiversity, various conventions at a global level happens. So, there are three major that needs to be understood. One is conservation of biodiversity, and next is conservation of international convention on international trade of endangered species of wild flora and fauna, and next is convention on migratory species. So, the sites is not part of UN, so it is part of IUCN. So, and CMS is part of United Nations EP, and it was founded under the Bonn Convention. So it has three appendices and it has two appendix. Next, let's in detail understand about Convention on Biodiversity. So it basically is an outcome of Earth Summit or Rio Summit of 1922. So it is under the UN. So it majorly has three objectives. One is conservation of biodiversity. Next is sustainable use of biodiversity and fair and equitable sharing of benefits from the use of genetic resources. So these three are the objectives. So similarly, in conference of parties under the Convention of Biodiversity, so there are two protocols that has been uh, obtained. So one is Cartagena Protocol in 2000 under COP5. Next is Nagoya Protocol 2010 under COP10, Conference of Parties 10. So what does Cartagena Protocol? So it is basically a supplementary agreement of Convention on Biodiversity, and it basically governs the movement of living modified organisms or genetically modified organisms. So example, so simply we know what is GM crops. So it is related to that kind of thing. So basically it seeks to protect the indigenous biodiversity. So no much gene manipulation should be taking place and the local indigenous biodiversity should be lost. So it basically strives in this manner. And next is Nagoya Protocol. So what does it say? So it is also a supplementary agreement of Convention on Biodiversity. So it is basically for effective implementation of third objective. So what is the third objective of CBD? Fair and equitable sharing of benefits from use of genetic resources. So whenever we are using the genetic resources locally, so the benefits which is arising from it should be equitably sharing and no monopoly in taking advantages of it. So to implement, so for implementation of it, so the Nagoya protocol is coming to place, and also there is other purpose of Nagoya protocol. The thing is HE targets. So HE biodiversity targets was formulated under this Nagoya protocol 2010 COP10. So it basically formulates 20 targets with five sections A to E. So these targets are between 2000. The fun part is, as per the recent Convention of Biodiversity, so these reports, so there is no country that achieved all 20 targets, all 20 HE biodiversity targets. So now coming to environmental pollution, so there are different types of pollution. First, let's talk about air pollution. So India has formulated related to air pollution an act called Air Act 1981. So there are basically two type of air pollutants. One is primary air pollutant and other is secondary pollutants. So what does primary pollutant means? It is formed by itself, means it is not formed by combining with any other compound. So it exists by itself. Like SO2 exists as SO2. NO2 exists as NO2. So now let's understand simply about the secondary. So it is a secondary pollutants are formed by interaction with primary pollutants. So what? Let's say O3 is example of secondary pollutant. It is formed by O2 free radical of oxygen combined with O2 oxygen. So then ozone O3 is formed. Simply another example is PAN, peroxyethyl nitrate. It is formed by the combination of hydrocarbon and nitrous oxide. So these are the difference between the primary pollutant and secondary pollutant. So there is an index for the measurement of these air pollutions. So one is firstly we have earlier National Ambient Air Quality Standards, which basically calculates 12 parameters. It was given by CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board. So the 12 parameters or the 12 pollutants which it consider here is particulate matter 10, particulate matter 2.5, SO2, nitrous dioxide, carbon oxide, ozone, NH3, lead. And these are 8. Next, another 4 is benzene, benzopyrene, arsenic, and nickel. Simply you can remember this as B square Al. So these 8 plus 4, so total 12. And in since 2014, so we are using this National Air Quality Index instead of NAAQ, National Ambient Air Quality Standard. So we are using this Air Quality Index. So basically it has 8. So it calculates 8 pollutants. So these are the 8 pollutants. So basically you can say National Air Quality Index is subset of National Ambient Air Quality Standard. And this AQI has 6 categories. So which are ranging from good, satisfactory, moderately, polluted, poor, very poor, and severe. So based upon the different levels of these 8 pollutants, CPCB will be categorizing into these 6. So in air pollution, most of the air pollution that which air pollutant is common is basically carbon monoxide (CO), then followed by SO2 and NO2. So these three are the top 3 air pollutants. Next major source of air pollutant is transport, which constitutes around more than 45%, and next is followed by industries. Remember, industries is not the first, but rather transport is the major contributor or major source of air pollution. Next, coming to water pollution. So there are two types of water pollution can be formed because of majorly two reasons, two types. One is through point source and other is through non-point source. What does the point source mean? So we know the origin from where this pollution or water is getting polluted, like industries. And what is non-point source means we can't track the origin of reason behind this water getting polluted. Example simply is drainage. India also has formulated a Water Act of 1964 under which CPCB was established. CPCB was at nation level and SPCB, State Pollution Control Board, was state level. So diseases associated with water pollution, these are some of the things which we need to remember. So first is blackfoot disease, so which is because of arsenic pollution. So next is blue baby syndrome, which is because of nitrate pollution. Next is ouch ouch disease because of cadmium, and Minamata because of mercury. And also remember the geographical regions where this pollution is concentrated. So basically this arsenic pollution is majorly concentrated in West Bengal region, and the fluoride pollution is majorly concentrated in Andhra Pradesh region, and this uranium pollution is mostly happening in Gujarat and Rajasthan regions. And some other minor important pollutions are like soil pollution, radioactive pollution, and plastic pollution. Also, there will be some like e-waste pollution. So there are many miscellaneous types of pollutions. Now coming to the conventions on pollution. So at international level, so by UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, there are majorly 4 conventions which are also popularly called as BRSM convention. So first one is the Basel Convention. So Basel Convention is related to the hazardous waste. So the major point is it does not include any radioactive waste. Even though radioactive waste is a hazardous, but it is not included in this Basel Convention. So next is Rotterdam Convention. It deals with hazardous chemicals and pesticides. And third is Stockholm Convention. It is related to persistent organic pollutants. So, and fourth one is Minamata Convention. It is related to the mercury pollution. So pollution because of mercury. So next, so this Minamata Convention is basically for water-induced diseases like fluorine, arsenic, uranium, but it is not, does not deal anything related to the waterborne. So waterborne disease, cholera is a waterborne disease. So it is deals only with water-induced diseases, not waterborne diseases. So we also need to remember this thing. And next, also we need to understand there is a fund called as a Global Environmental Facility, which will be funding majorly these five things. So under this, Stockholm and Minamata are also covered under it. So it majorly contains UNFCCC United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and UNCCD, UNCPD, Stockholm and Minamata. So we'll discuss about this Global Environmental Facility GEF detail in a while. So these are the major conventions related to the pollution called BRSM conventions. Now coming to a fresh topic called environmental issues and climate change. So in this, so we'll understand different concepts associated with it. So we all know there will be a solar radiation, short wave solar radiation. So let's say this is the Earth surface. So short wave solar radiation will be received. So why is it called a short wave? Because it has high energy. Because it is a solar radiation which is coming directly from the sun. So energy is high. So we also know that energy is indirectly proportional to wavelength. So here as energy is high, both are inversely proportional. So lambda, which is wavelength, will be low. So low wavelength means it means short wave. So it is called a short wave solar radiation. So okay, whenever it reaches the Earth through atmosphere at surface, so albedo happens. So albedo is simply, what does albedo mean? Albedo is simply the reflecting capacity. So reflecting ability or reflecting capacity. So example white. So if there is a white surface, so it has high albedo. If there is black surface, it has low albedo. Means it absorb more rather than reflect. It reflect more rather than absorbing. So albedo happens. So as the radiation, the solar radiation which reaches the surface, it will be radiated back in the form of a long wave radiation. Long wave radiation means it has low energy and high wavelength, high lambda. So long wave infrared radiation will be emitted from the Earth surface. So okay, this has been long wave radiation has been emitted by the Earth. This is fine. So now what happens? So there will be a concept called the greenhouse gases, which will be present in the atmosphere. So we'll discuss in detail about these greenhouse gases in a little later. As of now, we'll understand that there will be a presence of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, whichever the radiation, infrared radiation that is released by the Earth surface, which is getting reflected from the Earth surface. So the heat will be trapped by these greenhouse gases. So what happens whenever these greenhouse gases trap the heat? It leads to the global warming as temperature keeps on increasing as heat is trapping. So this global warming in a long span of time leads to the climate change. So this is the simple phenomena which we need to understand as of now. So we will discuss this clearly now. So yeah, so what we talked is so because of these greenhouse gases, there will be a global warming, means there will be a warming of Earth's atmosphere. This leads to a climate change in a long term. So now let's understand about the smoke. So smog is nothing but a combination of fog and smoke. So how we get smoke is through different sources like agriculture, vehicular, industrial, household. So there may be a number of ways where we get smoke. And fog, how the fog is formed. So fog is formed. So for the fog to be formed, we need temperature inversion condition. So at night time, so because of the cloudlessness, because of long nights, so the temperature inversion condition will be occurring. So this leads to formation of fog. So okay, we have fog and smoke. So this is a phenomenon is called as smog. So this is formed. So there will be two kinds of smog basically. So photochemical smog, which is also called as a Los Angeles smog, and the next is a London smog. So this photochemical smog is most important, which we'll be talking most number of times. So how this photochemical smog is formed? It is by the result of nitrous dioxide and volatile organic components. And London smog. This is formed by the result of SO2, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter. So now let's understand what are the different greenhouse gases that are present. So these are the different popular greenhouse gases that are present, like carbon dioxide, CH4, N2O, hydrofluorocarbon, perfluorocarbon, and SF6. So if whenever the carbon dioxide is increasing, then there will be a water vapor will be increasing. So what does it mean? So it means the amount of greenhouse gases present in the atmosphere. So that is what a water vapor. So if there is more water vapor, it indicates that there is more CO2 presence in the atmosphere. And other greenhouse gases is black carbon and brown carbon. Let us also understand the difference between the black carbon and brown carbon. So basically after CO2, black carbon is the second largest contributor to climate change, and it is formed by the incomplete combustion, whereas brown carbon is formed by impure combustion of organic matter and biomass. But black carbon stays in atmosphere for just weeks, means it is less time when compared to the brown carbon. Whereas brown carbon will be suspended in the atmosphere for a long time and it will be present there for a long time. But ironically, this black carbon even stays for less time in the atmosphere, but it has a high global warming potential. So what does it mean by global warming potential? So it is nothing but ability of the greenhouse gas to trap the heat in Earth atmosphere related to the CO2. So here we take CO2 as a reference. So how much CO2, so presence of CO2 will capture the heat. So we take it as a reference here. So here this is the order of greenhouse uh, global warming potential by greenhouse gases. So SF6. So even if it stays for a long time, but it has a huge global warming potential, means presence of it for even a less time will be able to capture more number of high amount of heat. So next followed after SF6 is HFC, hydrofluorocarbon. Next is perfluorocarbon, N2O, CH4, CO2. CO2 is lowest because for a simple reason, because we are taking it as reference. Next, we will understand about the concept called ozone hole. So, ozone hole. So, before understanding, okay, what do you mean by ozone hole? Hole is not literally mean there is a presence of hole, but it means depletion of ozone in stratosphere over the base, majorly over Antarctic region, because the depletion of ozone majorly happens at Antarctic rather than Arctic region. So now let's understand in detail about this ozone. So ozone is majorly of two types, tropical ozone and stratospheric ozone. So tropospheric ozone is a good ozone, we can say, we can say tropospheric ozone is a bad ozone, we can say stratospheric ozone is a good ozone, we can say, simply for our understanding. So tropical ozone is a short-lived greenhouse gas, and it is formed by the reaction of nitrous dioxide and hydrocarbons, whereas stratospheric ozone is formed by the combination of oxygen and free radical oxygen. This leads to formation of O3. So it is called as a regenerative reaction. So this is how it is formed. So O2 is there in the atmosphere, which will break down into ozone, and coming this ozone, when attached to another oxygen molecule, it forms O3. And similarly, this ozone also combining with another oxygen molecules forms ozone. So three times of ozone leads to three times of oxygen molecules leads to two twice of ozone molecules formation. So next is ozone depletion. What does ozone depletion mean? So we understand ozone hole. So ozone hole is nothing but ozone depletion. So ozone depletion will be seeing it in detail. So how we will be measuring this ozone depletion is based on the Dobson unit. So for the ozone to get depleted, so there is substances called ozone depleting substances (ODS). So there are different ozone depleting substances. So these substances are responsible for depletion of ozone. So what are these? Chlorofluorocarbon, hydrochlorofluorocarbon, NO2, and halon, and carbon tetrachloride, and methyl bromide, and methyl chloroform. So and some also other, there may be other components. So understand all these ozone depleting substances majorly consist of fluorine, bromine, fluorine ions. So most majorly fluorine ions. So for let's take an example of chlorofluorocarbon. So these basically will be able to travel the long distance And also this has biomagnification capacity. What is biomagnification? We have talked earlier. Also understand what is the difference between accumulation, bioconcentration, and biomagnification. So okay. So these are ozone depleting substances. And another thing what we need to understand is polar stratospheric clouds. So what are these polar stratospheric clouds? So basically these act as a platform for chlorine ions. So okay, so this is the Earth at a polar region. So let's consider currently as Arctic region. The same is also it is also same for the Antarctic region. So in polar stratospheric cloud, so let's say there is a cloud formation. So and also there is an ozone depleting substances are released. So let's say chlorine is released. So these chlorine ions gets attached to this polar stratospheric clouds. By so basically we know there is a ozone present. We have chlorine getting from ozone depleting substances. So what happened whenever this chlorine is reacted with ozone. So this leads to formation of this ClO plus O2. So this reaction happens. So we can say simply like this. Cl plus ozone leads to ClO ion plus oxygen. So Cl we are getting it from ozone depleting substance. Ozone is already present at stratosphere. So by this, so as a one molecule free radical of O3 is getting attached to chlorine and oxygen is separated. So okay, so ClO is forming. So what here there is no O3 presence. So we can say that there is a depletion of O3 as uh, one of the oxygen molecule, free radical oxygen atom is getting attached with the chlorine. So there is no O3 present. Yeah. So what we are saying here, so polar stratospheric cloud. So these act as a platform for chlorine ions, yes, and combined with the regenerative O3 reaction. So see here, it is the same. Cl plus O3 leads to ClO plus O2. Means nascent oxygen is more attached towards the chlorine than O2. So there is no more O3 presence in this reaction. There we can see there is no more O3. So it means ozone is decreasing. It is nothing but ozone is depleting. So it is this phenomenon is called as an ozone hole. So here ozone is decreasing, not like ozone is getting eliminated. So so here understand why ozone depletion is more in Antarctica. So earlier I told, so in southern hemisphere ozone depletion is more because the major reason is more stratospheric cloud is present in the Antarctica. So more stratospheric polar stratospheric cloud means there will be more ozone depletion because more number of CLOs will be formed. So now let's understand some of the conventions related to the ozone protection. So what are the efforts for ozone protection? So one is Vienna Convention. So Vienna Convention 1985 has took place. So it is related to the stratospheric ozone. It is not related to the tropospheric ozone because for the protection of stratospheric ozone, Vienna Convention 1985 took place. Under it, a Montreal Protocol in 1987 was taken place, was formulated. So it is basically this protocol was legally binding. So what it says is, so we need to, so presently we are using chlorofluorocarbon, so which is a ozone depleting substance. So this should be replaced with hydrochlorofluorocarbons and eventually from hydrofluorocarbons we need to move from hydrofluorocarbons. So this hydrofluorocarbon is not ozone depleting substance so that ozone can be saved. So stratospheric ozone can be saved. So the no ozone depletion or ozone hole will be formed. So this is the major idea behind the Montreal Protocol 1987. So there is a unique characteristic for this protocol. So it is the only treaty that was ever ratified by all 197 countries. So this is the speciality of this Montreal Protocol. And next after Montreal Protocol in 2016, so there is a Kigali Agreement. So it is also a binding thing. So there will be a question. So a question arises. So okay, we have Montreal Protocol. It is saying that HFC, which is not a ozone depleting substances, so we need to adapt to HFC. Okay, fine. So now what's the problem? So the major problem comes is So hydrofluorocarbon is not an ozone depleting substance. This is fine. But the problem is it is a greenhouse gases. So once revise earlier what we talked about greenhouse gases. So hydrofluorocarbon is one of the greenhouse gases. So this is the problem. So the problem lies here. So in 2016, everyone assembled and come under the and formulated a Kigali agreement. So it's binding agreement. So what it says is that we need to move from hydrofluorocarbons to hydrofluoroolefins, HFOs. So the specialty of this HFOs is it is neither ozone depleting substance, it is neither a greenhouse gas. So it is completely safe. So in Kigali agreement there is a so everyone has made a promise. What is by 2025 hydrofluorocarbon should be decreased by 80 to 85 percentage. So here understand. So there is no extreme wish. So it did not say that complete phase out of HFCs. So it says that by 2024, 80 to 85 percentage of the HFC should be uh, replaced with HFOs. So it is basically a rational agreement. So your agreement is a rational agreement, you can say, practical agreement. So now understand the important concept, polar vortex. So it is one of the important concepts where many people will be confusing. So let us understand it in detail. Okay, polar vortex. So we'll also understand in polar vortex how does it impact the ozone depletion. So what is polar vortex? So polar here means so it happens in a polar region. The phenomenon is happening with respect to the polar region. And what does vortex mean? Vortex is nothing but it is a rotating system. So here the rotation is happening in anti-clockwise direction. Whereas anti-clockwise direction in northern hemisphere, whereas in clockwise direction in southern hemisphere. Okay, so what is a rotating system? So it is simply nothing but a circular movement of wind in upper level of atmosphere. So this polar vortex happens in between the upper troposphere or tropopause and extends until the stratosphere. So, so okay, this is the Earth, right? So it happens here. So in anti-clockwise direction. So at upper layers of atmosphere, this polar vortex or rotating system is taking place. So what is this polar vortex? It is basically a low pressure system. So as it is in the polar region, it holds the cold air. So we can say like this. So low pressure system holding cold air. So this is the polar vortex. This is the feature of polar vortex. So why low pressure is forming? So as it is a cold region, so generally it should form a high pressure, right? So now why it is forming a low pressure? So the simple reason is so there will be a warm air from the subpolar low or polar front. So this warm air from this region will be rising and the low pressure system will be formed in the upper layers of atmosphere. So to understand this, we need to go more deep into the pressure belts, Hadley cell, Febrile cell, polar cell. So which we'll be discussing in geography. So understanding it will make it more sense. So as of now, remember it. So the warm air from the polar front rises. So to form a low pressure belt. So to form a low pressure system, which is known as a polar vortex. So okay. So basically polar vortex is strong in northern hemisphere, means it is strong in Arctic. So why it is simple reason is because of the land ocean area distribution, because more so when compared to southern hemisphere, more land is present in northern hemisphere and there will be a unequal distribution of land and ocean in northern hemisphere. And so in northern hemisphere or at Arctic region the polar vortex is stronger. Next important thing is so we need to know what is polar jet stream. So what is the relationship between this polar vortex and polar jet stream? So we know. So yeah, this is that. So here there will be a polar jet stream that will be revolving, right? So so this polar jet stream will be stronger in winter. So why in winter it is so stronger? Because of high temperature difference, delta T. So in summer it is so as the temperature difference delta T is less, so it will be weak. So the winds will be weak. So the polar jet stream is weak. So similarly the case with the polar vortex. So polar vortex is also strong in winter and it is weak in summer or spring.
In winter it is strong, in summer it is weak. The simple reason, as like I told earlier, it is a temperature difference. Okay, so in summer there is a weak winds. Okay, this is fine. So polar jet stream is weak. Okay, fine. So if polar jet stream is strong, it stays in this way. As okay, let's understand it in detail by this diagram. Okay, so strong polar vortex is there and strong polar jet stream is there in winter situation. Okay, this is fine. So whenever let's understand about now the summer. So in summer, so there will be a weak polar jet stream and weak polar vortex. So whenever the polar vortex polar jet stream is weak, so it is not it will be not in this fashion, but rather it will be in meandering form. So why it is a meandering form? Because the pressure, so this polar vortex, warm air will be pushing. So the cold air from this polar vortex is pushing in this way and the warm air is pushing in this way. So this leads to formation of meandering which are known as a Rossby waves. So because of weak winds, so weak winds of polar jet stream, especially in months of summer or spring season, so Rossby waves will be formed. So this basically leads to expansion of polar vortex. So we can simply understand this polar jet stream is shielding the polar vortex. So polar vortex without entering into the northern USA, Canada, Russia. So polar jet stream is simply gating or shielding the polar vortex. So whenever this polar jet stream is weak, this polar vortex is entering into the so understand this also understand this polar vortex contains the cold air. So this cold air will be entering into the northern parts of USA, Canada, Russia. So the polar vortex now will be expanding because of the weak polar jet stream. So this PSC will be expanding. So polar stratospheric cloud will be expanding. So it means more chlorine ions settle on PSC. Means so ozone depleting happens. So there will be less ozone and ozone depleting will be happening more. So the conclusion what we can come here is so with the strong polar vortex, with expansion of polar vortex leads to enhancement of ozone depletion. So now let's understand the concept of ozone acidification. So what does ocean acidification mean? So acidification here means there is a decrease in the pH value, pH level. So So let's say increase in the CO2 released into the atmosphere by various man-made or natural activities. Oceans, as we know, oceans act as a carbon sink. So this CO2 is absorbed by these oceans. So now what happens? So we know there is yeah. So H2O is the water and CO2 is absorbed by this water, which is ocean. So this leads to formation of H2CO3, which is carbonic acid. So it means H plus ions are increasing. So whenever H plus ions are increasing, it means pH is decreasing. So this leads to ocean acidification. So what are the effects of ocean acidification? Let's understand. So so let's say this is some okay. Okay. So let's say this is the ocean and this is some imaginary line. So this is some imaginary line, let's say some imaginary line. So how we are drawing this imaginary line is basically above this line there are saturated carbonate ions, so which is favorable for COCO3 formation, which leads to the which leads in the formation of coral reefs. And below this imaginary line, there is an unsaturated carbonate ions. So we call this imaginary line as carbonate compensation depth. So this is the thing. So now what happens? What's the relation of this carbonate compensation depth with ocean acidification? Whenever ocean acidification happens, so how ocean acidification happens? We already understand. With release of more CO2 leads to formation of more hydro H plus ions. Release of more H plus ions in the ocean. So this leads to the formation of this leads to the decrease of pH level,
It is called ocean acidification. Okay, fine. So okay, ocean acidification happens now with formation with ocean acidification happening. There will be a decrease of saturated carbonate ions. So what does it mean by decrease of saturated carbonate ions? So it means the imaginary line is rising above. So we get this carbonate compensation depth level is increasing. So it means saturated carbonate ions are decreasing. So decrease of saturated carbonate ions leads to increase in the level of CCD. Means CCD level is going up. So it means decrease of coral reefs and decrease of calcifying ability. So this is the major effect of ocean acidification. Next concept is acid rain. So what does in acid rain, what does acid mean? So acid means the pH is less than 5.6. So what is the combination of this acid rain and what are the components that it contains? So it basically contains SOx plus NOx, sulfur dioxides and nitrous oxides along with water vapor and sunlight leads to the formation of acid rain. So if there are more sulfur oxides and nitrous oxides uh, embedded with water vapor and sunlight leads to the formation of acid rain. So there will be wet deposition of acids and there is also dry deposition of acids. So wet deposition of acids from atmosphere to earth surface. So this will be in the wet deposition means it rain, snow. Dry deposition means in the form of a dust, gases, these things. Next is climate change strategies. So what are different climate change strategies? So or also understand different terminologies. So first, what is carbon sequestration? So carbon sequestration is nothing but capturing the carbon and storing the carbon. So it can be by terrestrial sequestration or it can be by geological sequestration. What is terrestrial sequestration means? It's simply tree. So tree basically by growing trees, it will be basically capturing the CO2. Geological sequestration means the CO2 we capture it and it store beneath, so store it in the deep undergrounds. So this is about carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration. Next is carbon sink. So anything is called as a carbon sink if it absorbs more CO2 than the CO2 that it releases. So example tree. So tree is called as carbon sink. Why? Because it absorbs more CO2 than the CO2 which it releases. Next concept is carbon credit. So an organization can earn one carbon credit, let's say. So when can it earn one carbon credit? If it emit 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. So basically it emits 1 ton less amount of CO2. Then it can earn one carbon credit. So we can say like this. So one carbon credit is equivalent to 1 ton of CO2 emission. Next, what is carbon offsetting? So carbon offsetting. So let's say we take about place one. So basically place one releases 1 ton of CO2 means plus 1 ton of CO2. And let's say there is another place which releases or which avoid to release 1 ton of CO2 minus 1 t CO2. So that's why you're writing. So basically it avoids to release 1 ton of CO2. So how we can, so simply by installing solar power plants, so renewable energy. So by investments in renewable energy, it can decrease the amount of CO2 that it can emit. So this is called offsetting. So here we are in place one, you have released 1 ton CO2. In P2 place, we have avoided release or emitting of 1 ton CO2. So here balance. So here absorption is balanced with releasing of CO2. So the same is thing with carbon neutrality. What does carbon neutrality means? So carbon emissions, so total number of carbon emissions is equal to total number of carbon emissions carbon that is absorbed. Then it is called carbon neutrality. What is carbon negative? Whenever the emissions is less than absorption, then it's called carbon negative. Next, what is carbon tax? So whoever is releasing more number of carbons, taxing on them is simply known as a carbon tax. Next, what is carbon intensity? So it means nothing but amount of carbon release per GDP It is known as a carbon intensity. So next important concept is carbon market. What are carbon market? So this concept has been evolved by Kyoto Protocol under UNFCCC, UNFCCC. So the carbon market is majorly divided into project based and non-project based. What is project based? Project means simply establishing some project. So in non-project based, there will be no project that will be established. So let's understand about the project. So a project will be set up by a country. So by a country, like so what it may set up. So like solar power plant. So in another country. So before understanding this, so there will be two type of countries that has been classified. One is annex countries, one and other is non-annex countries. Non-annex countries. So annex countries are any country that is a developed country. Non-annex countries that is those are called as the developing countries. So if a project is set up by a country, what is this country? It is an annex country, obviously. So only the country which is a developed country, is an annex country, will be able to do investments. So if annex country has made a project set up in another developed country, that is in another annexed country, then it is called clean developmental mechanism, CDM. And similarly, if a annexed country has made a project set up or invested in developing country, which is a non-annexed country, then it is called joint implementation. Only the name is different. So simply it means so A plus A means annexed country is investing in annexed country. For example, let's say USA is investing in European Union, and joint implementation means annexed country is investing in non-annexed country, means developing country. So let's say simply USA is investing in India. Then it is called joint implementation. Here it is called clean developmental mechanism. This is about project based. Now coming to non-project based. What is non-project based? So non-project based is the concept under its emission trading. So if let's say India has been allotted to release or to use so 100 tons of CO2. So India can emit 100 tons of CO2 into atmosphere. So this is permitted. But India has emitted only 90 tons of CO2, carbon dioxide. So 10 tons of CO2 is saved. So it means, see, understand, earlier we talked about, so what is one carbon credit? One carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of CO2. So here 10 tons of CO2 is saved, means 10 carbon credits. So India can sell these 10 carbon credits. So this is non-project based. So this is known as emission trading. So saving the emissions, emission capacity or the emission quota which were allotted and selling them to other countries. So now let's understand about the climate change organizations. So this is the most important thing. So in 1972 there happened to be a Stockholm conference. It is also called as the United Nations Conference on Human Environment. So on 5th June 1972 it took place. So from then onwards 5th June is being considered as Environmental Day. So, okay, Indira Gandhi, after attending this, so we have formulated an act called Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. And so here we are just understanding the sequence of different climate related organizations that is formed in time scale. So this is the first conference that happened. And the second, because as a result of it, we formulated Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Next, so in 1987, our Common Future Report was released. So this is the first time where the concept of sustainable development was mentioned. So based upon these recommendations of this report, IPCC in 1988 was created. It was created by United Nations Environmental Program and WMO, World Meteorological Organization. So this IPCC Interpanel on Climate Change. So after it has been created in 1992, a historical event took place. It is the most important thing. So it happened at Rio. So hence it is called Rio Summit. It is also called as Earth Summit because a major organizations has been formed, has been set up under this summit. So it is also called as United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. So any thing is same. So Earth Summit or Rio Summit or United Nations Conference on Environmental Development in 1992. So it created GEF, Global Environmental Facility. It is basically so financial mechanism. It not only does the financial support, but it also does the technical support. So in exam, if it is given that GEF, Global Environmental Facility, does only financial support, means it is wrong. Gives both technical and financial support. Okay, so let's see what are the organizations. So what are the frameworks that has been adopted under this Earth Summit? So first is UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this is the first thing, and second thing is UNCCT, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and the third convention is United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. So let's talk about first thing. So UNFCCC. So there are major summits that took place. Various so under every these things, COP will be taking place. Conference of Parties. So there are many COPs that took place. So let's see some of the important things. So Kyoto. So in 1997, so Kyoto Protocol was adopted in one of the Conference of Party. So it is basically a binding agreement. So this is the uh, time under which so this is the protocol under which so carbon market concept was adopted. So earlier we have discussed right carbon market. What is carbon market? So what is project based? What is non-project based? So this is all thing has been adopted under the Kyoto protocol. So it also talks about common but differentiated responsibilities. So what does common CBD, common but differentiated responsibilities means? So if we take examples of US, EU, all these countries, all these developed countries, so this has been emitting carbon from long time. So there has been historical emissions by these developed countries. But there are third world countries like India, all Africa, these countries. So this has been emitting in the recent past only. So having a same control or same regulation on these two countries, which is US and India, is not fair. So this concept of CBDI has emerged. So what it says is common. So yeah, what the measures we need to take may be common, but there will be different responsibilities for the historical emitters and the latest emitters. So this is about the Kyoto Protocol. And next important thing is Paris Climate Conference. So it happened in 2015. COP Conference of Parties 21. So it talks only about the loss and damage, and it does not discuss anything about the compensation and liability. Under this conference of party, under this COP only, ISA International Solar Alliance was established with initiative of India and France. So basically the headquarters of it is located in Gurgaon, India. And going in depth about UNFCCC, so it also created global Green Climate Finance (GCF) in 2010. So within the framework of UNFCCC, so GCF was established. It does not give any technical support, it just gives a financial support. And in COP 13, Bali Action Plan was formulated. So basically, it talks about REDD plus. So what does REDD means? It is nothing but reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. Before this RED plus, there is a concept called RED where India did not attend and have no significant related to India, but India supported this RED plus. So this is about UNFCCC. So next is UNCCD, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. So it is also a legal binding. And in 2000, so COP 14 in 2019 in Delhi, this conference took place. So India volunteered in this Delhi conference. So India basically voluntarily committed to restore 26 millions of degraded land in India. So it is known as bond challenge. So what does bond challenge mean? So India voluntarily committed to restore 26 million hectares of already degraded land. This is about UNCCD. Next, what is UNCBD? United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. So in 2012 in Hyderabad, COP 11 took place. So it is also legally binding. So it basically consists of Convention on Biodiversity, so sites and CMS. So what is sites? So these three things were already discussed earlier. So let's skim them quickly. So CBD. So it is related to UN sites, which is a convention on international trade of endangered species of wild flora and fauna. It is not anything related to UN. So it is also called the Washington Convention. So CMS, Convention on Migratory Species, it is called as the Bonn Convention. So in COP 13 of CMS was held in Gujarat in 2020. So, and coming to the CBD, it is basically a legally binding. It has majorly three objectives, and what is Cartagena Protocol, Nagoya Protocol, we have already discussed all these things earlier.